Hello, my name is Mike Gaines and this is Home Gains. Today we're going to talk about offers. How do you review them? What are you looking for? Is there just one offer or did you get multiple offers? And we're also going to talk about pricing, how to maximize the value of your home so that you get the highest and best offer for your property. So let's get started and looking at offers. The first thing I want to talk about is pricing. When you put your home on the market, you want to put it at a value that is reasonable. I tell my sellers we want to go on at about 98% to 100% of what we think the value is. Don't underprice your home. Don't put it at a point where you think you're going to get multiple offers. Let's say it's worth $1,500,000 and you say, well, I'm going to put it on the market at $1,350,000 and I want to see how many offers I can get and go way over asking and really, score on this sale. Well, that doesn't always work. And one thing you have to keep in mind is if you lower a property too much below its actual value and a buyer comes along and wants to write an offer, they're going to look at that difference between what you are asking for the property and what they're going to write. And they say, God, that's an awful lot of money over asking. So be careful that you don't underprice your property and chase away the highest offer from a buyer just because psychologically they look at that and say, wow, that is a big difference from what they were asking and what we're offering. So make sure that that number is in line with what the true value is, and you'll get the best buyers. They'll rise to the top. They'll give you your top dollar if you have the right property and they want it. So there's no need to underprice a property. And remember, when you put your property on the MLS, the price that you put on the MLS, make sure that that's a price. If that's the only offer you receive and that's the number that's on that offer, that you'll sign it. You'll accept those terms. Don't put your property on the market at a lower price thinking, well, I would never accept that. I'm anticipating multiple offers and it going way over. That's just a teaser price to get it on the market. Don't do that. But the price that the buyers will look at and say, that's a reasonable price to offer that property. I like it. I may offer more because I want it, but don't underprice it so that you get a lot of buyers coming in there and anticipating they're going to get a really good deal on that property, and you want more than what you're asking. Now we're going to talk about multiple offers and we're going to also talk about single offers, but some of this information applies to both. Number one, when you're putting a deal together or you have a home on the market and you have a buyer who's interested, communication is key. Always have good communication with the buyer's agent, or if you're a buyer's agent, good communication with the listing agent. Know what the sellers are looking for, know what the terms they want, what the conditions that they're asking for in that contract. What are their contingencies? Make sure you have a lot of information before you put your offer together. So once you present that offer, the sellers look at it. This is what we're looking for. These are the terms we like. This is the type of offer we were hoping to receive. It might not be the perfect number for the price, but the sellers will at least appreciate the offer and start working from that point. It's a point of negotiation to start from. So remember, gathering information and writing the right offer the first time is the best way to get that property. I always encourage a buyer's agent, even if our numbers aren't the same, even if this buyer's thinking a lower price than the seller, put that offer together. Make sure that we get a chance to negotiate, a chance to counter offer if my sellers aren't happy with that number. I always say, let's start the negotiation, put an offer together, and let's see where we end up. Now, as an agent, when I receive an offer, I read it over. I make sure that everything is correct, that there's nothing in there that would have to be countered back with a box that needed to be signed or a signature or a term was missing from that contract. Read it over, make sure it's complete. If it's not, send it back to the buyer's agent, make the corrections, and then have it sent back to you so that your seller has a complete offer that they possibly would just sign and not have to counter. Make it as clean as you can upon presentation. So it's important to review that offer and know that all the boxes are checked, all the prices are right, all the terms are correct. The second thing you want to do is call the lender. Talk to that lender. Find out how responsive that buyer was. Did they turn in all their paperwork quickly? Are they easy to communicate with? Are they well qualified? Are they a solid buyer that I have no concerns about? Gather that information before you do your presentation and share that with your sellers when you present the offer. Remember, keep the emotions in check. You're the filter for the whole process. The sellers, they may have never sold a property before. They're anxious or excited. They don't know what's going to happen. You want to be a steady and calm voice through the whole process. You may have had a hard time getting information from the buyer's agent or from the buyer's lender. Don't convey that to the sellers. Make sure that everything's positive when you're presenting that offer so that all they're focusing on are the terms that the buyers put into that contract. Okay, your home's been on the market for a while and you only receive one offer. The agent's done their research, found that this is a really strong buyer. They have really good financing. They're solid buyers, but their numbers aren't what the seller wants for their property. When you present that offer to the seller, keep it positive. Let the seller know that, hey, this is a great buyer. There's terms in this contract that are really desirable. Let's work on that number. Let's stay positive and try to find a way to make this work. Let's send a counter to them. Let's pull some comps up. Let's pull a CMA together and show the sellers where the values are at. Maybe some of the properties around your listing have closed for a lower price of what they were listed for. And the sellers need to know this information. When you prepare all of that information, you put a counter together, send the comps or the CMA with the counter to the buyer and the buyer's agent so they understand what the seller's thinking, how they came to this value. You can work it out if you stay calm, you keep the sellers positive, and make sure that the buyers are willing to work with you. Remember, they're good buyers. They just put out a price to start the negotiation process. Make it work, find the right number, and close the deal. All right, you receive multiple offers. Now what do you do? As an agent, I like to get all those offers organized. I want to call each buyer's agent and tell them that I did receive their offer. I review that offer. I let them know if I have any questions about the terms, anything that the sellers may ask about that offer. I want to get those answers before I present. And now if the offer has a loan, if the buyers are going to get a loan, I'm going to call that lender. I'm going to make sure that the buyers have been very responsive in getting all the documents to the lender. The lender hasn't had any problems getting all the information they need to put their loan package together. Once I have that information, I'm going to create a cover sheet, and that's going to have all the information, all the facts, all the terms of the contract on one page. So my seller can look at that and understand what the offer is. We'll have the offer underneath if we need to go inside and look for a more detailed term or something on there. But it makes it easier to have a cover sheet so the seller understands what's in that offer. In a multiple offer situation, communication with the buyer's agent is key. You'd be surprised at how many times I've received an offer and never had a conversation with the agent that presented it for the buyers. And I think that's a real injustice for the buyers because we should be talking. We should be talking about the terms that my sellers are looking for. We should be talking about the way we're going to close this transaction, developing a communication relationship so that the transaction goes much smoother. If you don't have any communication with a buyer's agent before you've presented that offer or before you've received it, that's a real red flag to me because I don't think that's a good communication that we're having, and it's going to be difficult during the escrow process. So make sure communication is key, that you're having conversations as a buyer to the seller's agent or as a seller to the buyer's agent. Now, a lot of times you're going to get on these multiple offer situations, buyers who are going to say, I'm going to offer you all cash, no contingencies, close in 7 days. In a lot of situations, that just makes a seller very happy. But there's some things you want to look at for that so that you make sure that your seller's getting the best deal and it's in your seller's best interest. Now, sometimes you'll get a buyer who will write you this great offer, but then when it comes time to maybe put their deposit in or go through the process of closing the deal, they'll pull back and say, you know what, I'm not sure if I want to move forward. How about if we do it for this price or we change the numbers? This can occasionally happen. So you want to make sure that that buyer is dedicated to that contract and they're going to close the deal that they put together in the first place. Now, the other situation is you want to make sure that the buyer hasn't written multiple offers, meaning they wrote an offer on your property, they wrote an offer on another property down the street or another property in another town. You want to make sure that your buyer is dedicated to buying your property. Sometimes you'll get a situation where a buyer will see how many properties they can get into contract, and then they decide on which one they want. So really vet that buyer and the buyer's agent to make sure that your buyers that are looking at your property are going to close that deal. Now, when you're looking at those offers and you have contingencies, if, let's say you have multiple offers and they all have contingencies, they're not all cash, no contingency offers, but they all want to work with you. Well, you want to look at those contingencies and hopefully you've talked to the buyer's agent previously before they presented the offer to make sure that all those contingency date removals are on the same day. The loan, the appraisal, and the property inspection are all removed within 10 or 12 days. You want to keep that timeline kind of tight so if you have any problems or any issues, you can deal with them in a short period of time and it doesn't drag all the way through the escrow. A lot of times in a multiple offer situation, you'll see the agent, the listing agent, ask for all the disclosures to be signed upon presentation of the offer. I don't like that. I think it's a waste of resources and it causes buyer fatigue. You know, if a buyer's gone through several offers and they're writing their fifth or sixth offer and they're required to sign 100 pages of disclosures, that really burns a buyer out. And it's not necessary. I think it's important that when you give the disclosures to the buyers, you give them a receipt, a document that says, here are all the disclosures we've given to you. Please sign this and give it back to us when you present your offer. And I'm going to talk about the 72 hours and how that works. And this will play into that as well, because it's important that you give the buyers time to look at the property, to investigate, and to get those disclosures back to you. So we'll talk. All right, the next thing I want to talk about is in a hot market, you get a lot of buyers who want to write you an offer that says no contingencies. And I talk about this in some of my other videos, and I want to cover the period of time that I recommend for a buyer to have to investigate a property. When a buyer writes an offer, they'll say, I don't want a loan contingency, I don't want an appraisal contingency, and I don't want a property inspection. Well, I really encourage buyers to put 72 hours in their offer when they present it. And I explain to the sellers, this is to protect them. Because what happens is if a buyer feels that they're compelled to write a non-contingent offer in a hot market in 6, 12 months down the road, they feel that maybe they weren't given enough time to investigate the property and they felt compelled to write this offer that really took away a lot of their rights. Well, if you go to court and a judge sees this, it might not go in the seller's favor. So I recommend the 72 hours for a couple of reasons. 72 hours is reasonable for them to look at their disclosures, because when they make their offer in the contract, it says that they have to have their deposit into escrow by 72 hours. Now, you may shorten that time frame up, but by default, it's 72 hours. So if they're going to put their escrow in, or their deposit into escrow within 72 hours, have faith that they're going to remove that contingency for the property inspection. They're going to move forward. If you give them the disclosures and they're able to review those in those 72 hours and return all of those with their contingency removal for the property inspection, you've covered yourself. The buyers have been given an opportunity to investigate the property. And I think it's in the best interest of everybody in the transaction that this 72 hours is forced upon the buyer to investigate the property. They're going to be putting their deposit in that 72 hours, so it's not going to be a problem. They're going to close a deal. They didn't write the offer to back out. So have faith that 72 hours is the best thing you can do for the buyers and the sellers. So a couple other things I'd like to talk about. Buyers, when you make an offer on a property and you say, I'm going to put down 3% of the purchase price within 72 hours as a deposit, if your offer is accepted, that 72 hours is not a cooling off period. It's not a time to think about the offer. You owe that deposit to the contract. Now, if there's a problem and the buyers want out, I recommend the sellers let them go, get going on with the next offer or the next buyers, and don't worry about that one that didn't do anything, that gave you a great offer, that said, I'm going to pay all cash, close in 7 days, and never puts their deposit into escrow. Don't go fight that battle. Let it go. But be aware of that happens, and advise buyers not to do it, because if you get your contract accepted, that deposit is due in escrow regardless if you have contingencies or not. Another tip is if you're the listing agent, you have multiple offers, don't write an offer. Find another good agent that you can recommend to that buyer and they can write it for them. It's a mess if a buyer is using the agent who's listing the property and there's multiple offers. It's not good for the buyer, it's not good for the seller, and it's certainly not good for the agent. Now remember, as you're working through those multiple offers and you have a clear winner that the sellers are going to sign, they're going to move forward with this, look for a backup offer. Find the second strongest offer. Talk to the agent, say, hey, would you like to be a backup offer? That way, if the first person backs away, you've got somebody in place that doesn't have to go back on the market and you get the property sold. There are two types of backup offers. There's a consecutive, meaning the first buyer is in place, they back out, the second buyer moves in and they start from day one. Or you could do a concurrent. Now, a concurrent listing is where both parties, both buyers, are moving through the process side by side. The only disadvantage is that the second place, the backup buyer, they're going to order an appraisal, and that appraisal is going to cost some money. Now, if the seller is really on a tight timeline, where they need to close this property because they've purchased something else and they need these funds to close that deal, they may be willing to cover that cost of that appraisal for that second backup buyer just as an insurance policy, that if the first buyer backs away, they're able to put that second buyer in place, move forward, and close on the timeline that they need to close so they can close their other property they're depending on the funds for. And remember, if you're going to send out multiple counters, make sure that all the buyers know that they're aware of that there are multiple counter offers going out. In the old days, it used to be the first counter offer that was signed and was back to the office won. And that's not the case anymore. So now when you send out multiple counter offers, let's say you send out 4 and 2 of them come back. Now the sellers are going to make a decision of which one of those two they wanted to sign. They're going to sign one and send it back. And then you have a receipt that the sellers have signed that counteroffer after the buyers have signed it, and everybody's clear on who got the property to purchase. Now, here's a little tip. I've seen situations where a buyer received a counteroffer and they knew there was multiple counteroffers, and they counter once again for even more money. So let's say the seller says, I want another $50,000 in my counteroffer. Well, the buyer can say, I'll give you 75 in trying to secure that property. So look for that. That can happen. It certainly makes the sellers happy because now they got more money than they were anticipating. Well, I hope you found that information about reviewing offers for a seller useful. If you have any questions about today's video or any questions about real estate at all, certainly send me an email and I'd be happy to talk. Once again, my name is Mike Gaines. This is Home Gains. Please subscribe and like, and have a great day.